Now, what I will actually go over now is we'll go through the image tabs. So there's a lot of functions here, and what we'll do first is the layers. So we unlock the layers, and actually, no, we'll talk about the layers first, shall we? Okay, so the layers are pretty simple. So I mean, obviously you've got you've got your background and your top one, so it's just a matter of order. So if you put that on the bottom, he's going to disappear. So it's just a stack basically. So whatever's on the top is going to be on the top, etc. So layers are pretty simple, and if you just want to add a new layer, that's just this little button here. Then you'll get a new layer there, and then for example, you could just do a fill, for blue. And then what you could actually do is you've got different layer modes as well. So these are the blending modes for the layers themselves. So as I said, it's on normal at the moment, which just means it's overriding the bottom layers. So you've got quite a few different options here. And again, it's just sort of playing around. So if you multiply, then that sort of gives it an overall. It's blending that blue layer with the adjacent or with the colors beneath it, so it gives it a sort of blue hue. Now, with this still selected, you can actually just go up and down on the keyboard, and that'll give you sort of different sort of effects. It's just a matter of mucking around, seeing which one, if you want to sort of do it. You get some interesting sort of effects, like that's just like funky, inverted, and it looks kind of cool. But that's just sort of how the blending of the layers work, and obviously you can work with the intensity too. So you can bring the opacity. So you can sort of determine how much you want to blend it together as well. But that's just sort of that's a basic overview of how the layers work. So yeah, that's that. So what we'll do. So one thing to note, just to be aware of with layers. So you can merge layers. So let's just say that we're happy with the way this looks here. What we would do, you can merge either two ways. So you can select which layers that you want to merge. We won't worry about this one. So to delete it, you just bring it into the little trash can at the bottom. So we can select both layers here. So to actually select both layers, you click on one, hold down Control, and click on the other. And inversely, if you had, say, a big stack of layers, like say there was 10 here or 8 or whatever, you could just click on the top one and hold down Shift, and then click on the bottom one, and that does it all in one big hit as well. So that's how you select within the layers tab here. Now you can merge by clicking merge layers here, or merge layers. So that'll merge them all now. So that's just to be aware, that's a destructive operation. So once they're merged, you can't separate that bird anymore now. They're all wedged together there. So that's just something to be aware of when you're working. When you do merge, I always tend to just keep an original file before I merge, and that way if I need to go back to it, the options there. So that's just that's a destructive, they call that a destructive edit, which is basically Photoshop's main workflow. So you can merge that way, Control Z. You can also go Control Shift and E, and that also merges it too as a shortcut. So we'll go through the image tab now. So under image, I guess the first thing to be aware of is your adjustments. So there's quite a few different options within these, and this will relate. These concepts will relate to the raw editor, which I'll go over after this. But we'll just go through sort of the main adjustment tools that you'll be using. So first and foremost, you've got brightness and contrast. So this one is quite simple. So that'll literally brighten the color information or darken it depending on which way you want to work. And then contrast obviously boosts the contrast of the image itself. It's pretty, it's easy to overdo contrast, so I tend to, if I were to edit, I'd sort of just keep it, pretty mild. And you've got the preview, so you can sort of see, the effect of this this particular function. All the functions have got like a little preview window there too, so you can just switch between the two and, see where you're at with it. So anyway, that's the brightness and contrast. We'll just leave that one. Now we'll move on to the level. So this is quite an important one, the level. So this is your actual your information, within the image itself. So what you have here is, so you've got the shadows here, which is the left slider. You've got your midtones, which is in the middle, and then you've got your highlights on the right here. So the best way to sort of think about the color information is kind of, I just use the analogy of like, the midtones is like your body, then your highlights are like your head, and your shadows are like your feet. So most of the information, is held within the body of the image. So, when you, alter the midtones, you'll notice that you're pushing most of the information within the image. And that's just that's a general rule of thumb. It depends on, how it's been shot. I mean, if it's a really overexposed shot, for example, you'll have a lot more highlight information, but as a general rule, most of your info is going to be in your midtone. So when you make adjustments, that's going to make the biggest difference. So, we could sort of, bring a bit of darkness to the midtones if we like. Now then you've got your highlights, so that's just bringing up the highlights. You can really crush them, and you got to be careful with the highlights. It's easy to overdo it, like when you're beginning, like, oh, that looks cool, but you'll get into it after a while, and you'll look back at those first ones and go, ooh, what was I thinking? But it's all part of the fun. It's all a learning process, and then obviously your shadows really darken up the image too. So that's your level. So these are very useful. Just to make those sort of really just sort of minor tweaks. I mean, we could probably we'll make it a little bit darker, maybe just like that. Alrighty. So, and again, every move that you make is set in stone now. So it's all destructive, which is pretty cool. Now the next one we've got is curves, which is it's basically the same concept as the levels, except instead of 3 sliders, you've got a curve that you can work with. So again, this still represents the actual information of the image itself. But what you do on the actual curve, you click, and you've added what's called a Bezier spline to the curve. And then if you move this one, so then that'll move, this part of the graph here is your shadows. So that's going to be moving it downwards, as you were to a slider. And then obviously you can put a point up here, and you can bring it up like that. So the curves are pretty powerful as well. You can make subtle sort of adjustments using the curves. Again, it's basically an alternate to the level. So it's just whatever way you're comfortable working with. I tend to just use the levels myself, but the curves do come in handy if you just want to add that tight, like you can go really, really tight on the blacks, and sort of bring it back down, so you can just really crush it in like an infinite, or like a minute amount of detail. So it has its purpose as well. So that's the curves component. Now we'll go exposure. Can be useful as well. So this is literally changing the exposure. Again, it's similar to your levels, but you can offset it as well. So you can make it really dark, and gamma correction. So gamma, that's your midtones, is what that is referring to. That's just another name for it. So that's sort of can sort of bring back a lot of midtone information. So again, it just depends what exactly you're trying to achieve. You can do, as I said, you can do similar things like this with the levels, but it's just an alternate approach to it. And that's what you'll find with Photoshop too. There's quite a few different ways you can go about doing something, but that's just one example. Now the next one, HueSaturation. So this one's really useful. It's a cool little one. So again, you've got a lightness function. So that was the same as the brightness and contrast. Literally lightens and darkens the image. We'll just leave it there. You've got your saturation boost here, so you can make it look awful doing it oversaturated. You just see so many photos that are just oversaturated. It's just it's cool to start with, but you got to be careful with the saturation. And then you've got your hue. So this is literally shifting the overall colors of the image. So you can really warp it. If you want to go really stylized, you can do it like that, which is pretty cool. And finally, within the hue, you've got this option here to colorize. So when you do that, it boosts the saturation down, but that'll just give it an overall hue color. So it literally will just flatten it down to one particular color range, which is useful for certain, stylized kind of effects. It's, as I said, these tools are open-ended, you just, it's just good to know how they work, and then you can, muck around and do, whatever you want to achieve, So we've got those ones. Now color balance is interesting as well. So this is basically shifting the intensity of certain colors within the image information. So currently we've got the midtone selected. So we could shift, more blue information into the image. And as you can see, it's really cooling the image down. There's not many greens present within it, but again, you can move it, if you wanted the, a bit more of a magenta kind of sunset type background, you could push some of the color information into the magenta within the midtones, and then, the clouds being a highlight, you could even, push, make them a bit more magenta, or you could, neutralize them a bit by, bringing it back into the green, which looks kind of nice. And again, shadows. So, if you want, you could, I guess we could cool down the shadows a little bit, a little bit. Okay. So, that's the color balance as well. So that's, quite a powerful tool as well. It's definitely, you can get some nice little color tweaks and that with it. So that's the color balance within the image tab. And what else have we got? So, they're the main sort of ones. And then you've got invert, which is literally, we'll just invert all the colors. Or Control Z. The shortcut for invert is Control I as well. So, which is, sometimes, you don't really use it, but, you can play around with it, do what you want. Now, I guess the next thing in the image tabs that we'll talk about is the actual the image size and the canvas size. So the image size itself, this is the pixels within this image here. So, 2785 by that. So if you like, you can change the size itself. So you can blow up the image. So like, say if you wanted it 3000, that'll increase the image size, and the image file size will increase with that. And you've got a resample rate, so you can use basically when you increase the size of an image, you can use a different sort of algorithm to preserve the details, because when you're increasing the image size, you're going to lose quality. It's going to it just degrades after a certain point. Going from up to 3000, that's not too bad, but if you were to double it, it just looks it looks trash. So you try and work with the biggest image to start with. You don't really want to be resizing the image if you can avoid it. But if you choose to, though, you've got your resamples here. So these are just different algorithms which you can see. So that you've got to preserve details. You can smoothen it out. You've got a sharpener, and again, these are very, very subtle effects. And you've got your nearest neighbor, which sort of hardens out the edges. So that's what the image size basically does. But we won't actually change any of that because, as I said, it does degrade the image itself. Now you've also got canvas size. So this is different because this is the current canvas within Photoshop. So say you want to actually increase the background size, but you didn't want to increase the image resolution, so you could then just increase this to say 30, and we'll go to height for we'll just go 20, and okay. And so what that does, that just increases your actual canvas that you're working on itself. So that's just something to be aware of. If you if you've got a bigger image that you want to add to it or what have you, that's how the canvas size actually works. So we'll just Control Z that one. Okay, so that is image size and canvas size. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, image rotation. So this is, pretty self-explanatory. So crank it to 180, you're going to have an upside down bird flying all which way. Control Z, and then obviously you can just rotate it clockwise 90 degrees. You can Control Z to undo, sorry. Counterclockwise, and you can also go, so what's kind of cool, you can go horizontal, so you can flip it the other way, which is pretty sweet, and you can also flip it vertically. So what's actually I actually use this, if you've been looking at an image for ages, you've been working on an image for a while, it's sort of you get accustomed to it, and so it's always, I always just like to flip the image horizontally sometimes, because you sort of get a fresh perspective on it. And then you say, okay, cool, I can, this part here doesn't look that good, etc., whatever. So, that it's actually, just it's sort of like a refresher, that's so So yeah, the image rotation is a cool little function, man. So that's just something to be aware of.